Good morning. We are here for InLight Connections. Thank you for joining in to our program. Today we're interviewing Miss Clarice Jackson. She is the founder and CEO of Black Literacy Matters and of the actual entity Voice Advocacy Center. So that's an actual place, a business.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you so much for joining us, Clarice.
Thank you.
And I'm here today. My name is Marilyn McGarry, and to my left here is Apostle Aretha Mayberry. So if you would, could you open up by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, absolutely. But first, I want to give honor to God, who is the head of my life. And I know that's usually what you hear when you go to church, but he truly is.
Amen.
And one of my favorite scriptures is it's in him that I live, move, and have my being.
Praise
And
God.
so
Yes.
it is in him that I'm here and how I'm moving and how we're having our being
Yes.
in this conversation. So I honor both of you all. I'm Clarice Jackson, as you stated. I'm born and raised here in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm the mother of two children, one of which my son is graduating from college
praise
next
God.
weekend.
Congratulations.
Yeah, debt-free.
Congratulations.
Debt-free, yes.
Debt-free, no debt,
That's
no
awesome.
student loans or
Okay,
anything.
awesome.
And so God has been a
Praise
promise
the
keeper.
Lord.
And so I'm very, very grateful
Yes,
about
that's
that.
That is
awesome.
awesome.
And as you stated, I operate a organization called Voice Advocacy Center, and it's the first of its kind in the state of Nebraska.
Wow.
It's a dyslexia screening, tutoring, and special education advocacy organization.
awesome.
So we deal with all things literacy, and dyslexia is the most common reason why people struggle to read, and special education. And then just recently, with this last month, we did our inaugural Black Literacy Matters conference, and
Awesome.
that organization has been birthed.
Awesome.
Okay.
We can't wait to hear about that a little bit later.
Yes.
Tell us, define for us what is Black literacy.
Black Literacy Matters was birthed from a dialogue that transpired back in 2020 when George Floyd happened, and all of the outrage surrounding his heinous murder that we all witnessed
Yeah.
via TV.
Yes.
And I happened to be a part of a large literacy group that was predominantly white. And someone came knocking on their door like I had prophesied to them many, many years prior to that, is that, you know, when we're talking about dyslexia, we have to ensure that we include all people. And even though you may not be intentionally doing that, if your social media context, your imaging is all white, it leads people to believe that you're saying that dyslexia is a very white-centered
Yes.
disability, which it is not. Dyslexia is not, it does not discriminate against who you are. It doesn't care who you are. You can be black, you can be white, you can be Hispanic. It impacts us all. So from that, it was a play on words for Black literacy, Black lives. And so my wheelhouse and my lane that God put me in is literacy. So Black Literacy Matters was birthed from that context. And the Lord kind of instructed me to trademark the name first before you start to do anything else. Trademark the name,
Awesome.
because
That's great.
so I had to wait 2 years for that. And so the name was trademarked. And then from there, God began to give me the vision for bringing together a group of thought leaders that really are centered on literacy and bringing us together, bringing the NAACP into the situation, and us having a serious conversation about how we close and even eradicate the literacy gap that exists between Black students and their other racial counterparts.
Yes.
Yeah. So the term literacy basically means being able to read and to write. Is
Read,
that right?
write, and spell. Yes.
Read, write, and spell.
Read, write, and spell, and to be able to not just to read, but to read and then read to learn, and then read to just enjoy life, to be able to do the things in life that literacy intersects with, which is
Sure.
in all areas.
Yes.
Yes.
So tell us what dyslexia is.
Dyslexia is a language-based processing disorder. So simply put, in layman terms, dyslexia is a literacy issue where you are not, where the brain struggles to process language. And for the English language, which is the hardest language to learn, if we don't teach them in a way, which is called teaching to the code, there's an English code. And so there is a structured, explicit, systematic, multisensory way that will benefit all children in reading, not just children who are dyslexic, but for the dyslexic child, it is necessary that they be taught in that way. And what public schools and most education systems have been doing for a very long time is teaching what's called a whole language way. Balanced literacy is another term, and 3Qing, which are all non-scientific ways of teaching reading. So there's no evidence to prove that the way these things are being taught, that they actually teach children. And so that's why we have the literacy crisis that exists in the United States right now. If you don't know, we are in a literacy crisis. We have been in a literacy crisis. And so for me, when it pertained to children with dyslexia, it was because my daughter had dyslexia. And so that's how I initially got involved. But Black Literacy Matters is addressing the urgent right to read that Black students need and have not been getting. And so not only here in Nebraska, but across the nation, in every single state, 76 to 80 and even 90% of Black students are non-proficient. They're not even meeting basic standards in reading. 90%.
That's huge.
90%. So we have scores likened to post-literacy scores, where only 10% of Black slaves knew how to read. We have those scores today in this nation, across the nation, where we only have 10% of fourth graders, 17% of fourth graders that are only proficient in reading, meaning minimum standards. And the rest, 85, 88% cannot read.
So how do you think we got there? How did we get there?
I think that number one, if you really think about it, we don't have as many teachers of color in the classrooms. I think post-literacy, what we've learned from that is that a lot of children of color had people who looked like them, where literacy was it. It was the thing to aspire to. There was a honor in learning to read. People lost their lives attempting to read. So that was there. We also have where structured literacy, phonics, which is a huge piece of structured literacy. It's not the whole piece, but those particular components of reading were a factor.
Can you elaborate a little bit on phonics?
Phonics is just the sounds that the letters make. So, and then there's what's called phonemic awareness, which is just understanding what sounds make what correlate with what letter sound, right? And so the foundational skill that all children need to be successful readers is phonemic awareness. The National Institutes of Health created a panel a long time ago from the United States Department of Education, and they got together a lot of scientists. One of the main scientists was Reed Lyon. And they got together and they said, okay, let's figure out, how do people learn to read? Is this a natural thing? Is it as natural as learning how to speak? No. So you can listen to your parents, and then you can pick up the language, and you begin to say that once you get a certain age, 1, 2, mom,
but that's
mom,
speech.
dad,
That's speech. Yeah, it's language.
But literacy, learning how to read, is not natural. And so a lot of times, and for a very long time, people had that perception that reading is natural, that you just go to school and you pick it up. And then they started teaching kids in schools, just guess. Look at the picture and guess. And so that has been how a lot of our kids have grown up learning to read. And if you don't catch it in that way, then it's like, okay, what do we do with you? So then the next thing was, let's push you into special education. And we know a lot of Black students disproportionately are placed in special education, and they are misdiagnosed, or even if they genuinely need specific help, they're still not getting that help because the school systems don't use the science of reading. And so that's what we call the reading wars that are happening across the nation right now, is who's doing it better? Or do we keep what we know and what we've been using, which is balanced literacy, as I said, 3Qing, which is picture guessing and guessing for clues. Or what do you think this says? Guess. That's not how you teach reading. There is a scientific way, there is a code, there's rules that say this is why this letter says this. Two letters that make one sound are a digraph. How many of us were raised understanding that? I didn't know that until I started diving in to literacy and how we teach it and what's the best way to teach children. And then I started learning those things. And so those are the things that are taught. There's a reason, there's a method, there's a why behind this sound makes this sound, and why this sound is found in between this word. And two letters that make one sound are a digraph. And what are the endings of words? What are the common endings of words? Knowing those things teach children why, the whys of reading, and why you break it down this way, how to blend, how to decode, break apart a word.
And then the comprehension comes in there too.
And all of that comes in there. And so they weren't getting that.
So what's being done to help to correct that?
Well, what we've done is we've done a lot of advocating, a lot of going down to the Capitol and trying to get laws changed. However, even with getting laws changed, like the most profound law that we got changed here in Nebraska happened in 2018. And so that piece of legislation was for dyslexia, and it was that we start screening kids for dyslexia, because we weren't even doing that. When I was advocating for my daughter who couldn't read, she literally made it to the 4th grade unable to read simple 2 and 3-letter words. And that was acceptable.
That's terrible.
It wasn't that people didn't know it. Everybody knew it in the school. But their only thing was, we're doing the very best. I have literally a news piece from the director of special education at that time. And she said, we're doing the very best we can do for her. And I said, and your very best with my daughter, who has no cognitive problem, nothing that would intellectually block her from reading, if she can't read, that's a problem. And I'm supposed to leave her in this setting and accept that? And my answer and God's answer was no. And so we did something different. And then God compelled me to go back and pull some more people out.
That's good.
So that's what I've been doing.
I have another question, but I'm going to make a statement first.
Okay.
Have you heard of the social determinants of health? Okay. No. These are conditions in the environment where people are born, live, learn, work, play, worship, that affect a wide range of health, functioning, and quality of life outcomes, and risk. So, how does these social determinants affect literacy? Second part of this is health disparities, and I spoke briefly with that. We talked about that a little bit earlier before. How they may affect also literacy. Health disparities are preventable. It's the difference in the burden of disease that one has, their exposure to violence and injuries, and just getting access to quality health care. And most socially disadvantaged populations are the ones that are affected with these disparities.
Absolutely.
Are we starting to see literacy tied into these outcomes, or what is your thought on that? What do you think?
I think that, the road to hell was paved with good intentions. You've heard that phrase before. So I think it's a two-pronged part of that. I think the part that definitely weighs into everything that you just said is, yes, there are determinants that play into the literacy rates between Black students and their other racial counterparts. You have a lot of African American students, not all, but a lot, that are in poverty. And so one of the things that's really became a huge popular terminology and people really focused on that was trauma-informed care and trauma-informed instruction, and the Black kids are all in all of this trauma, and so
they're exposed to drugs and violence.
Drugs and violence, and so this trauma is the blocker to them being successful educationally and being successful in literacy. And that's where I say the road to hell was paved with good intentions, because we know that of the worst trauma that the black race has ever encountered is slavery.
Slavery.
Come on now.
Yeah.
Okay, and slavery, you dealt with rape, you dealt with
Yes,
beatings, you dealt with
yes.
your children being ripped from you, you dealt
Yes.
with your family, your husband, your wife,
Yes.
all of those things.
Took your
Yes.
total identity,
Took
your self-worth.
everything
Yeah.
from you.
Yes, yes.
Yet those people still desire to read,
That's right.
aspire to read,
That's right.
and became readers.
That's
Yeah, they
right.
did.
And so where trauma has its play, it is not an excuse to not educate these
That's
kids,
right.
because the gateway out of poverty is education.
Come on.
And our people, our ancestors understood that one key determinant for their lives socially and economically to change was to be literate.
Yes.
And slave owners at that time knew that to have people that were literate meant power and education.
right.
And we know ignorance
Yes.
and darkness
Yes.
is in not knowing and not having knowledge.
That is
Right.
so true.
And so I do not subscribe to that
Yeah.
piece of it.
So what would you say to a parent?
Mm.
What would be their role in ensuring their child is receiving the best quality education that's available to them?
Yeah, I think that for parents and in the space of literacy, I'm just going to speak from that aspect.
Okay.
What I have found, which dives into the kingdom, the kingdom anointing, and then the world and that concept, and it blends. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times schools say to parents, read to your kids, do this with your kids,
Yeah.
you need to be engaged, and they do
Yes.
need to do
Yes.
this. However,
Yes.
there's a generational curse factor that's transpiring within this literacy space, because a lot of these adults, because dyslexia runs in families, it's hereditary. So if you
Okay.
have somebody that's dyslexic in your family, and it affects up to 20% of the population, so 1 in 5 have dyslexia.
Wow.
They may not know they have it.
Yeah.
They'll just have the characteristics of it, which we'll get into. But a lot of parents were not taught to read properly or accurately. So it's hard for them to read to their kids. So when their kids
That's
are coming
right.
home struggling, they can't assist them with that because they themselves have not been
That's
and
right.
never had it addressed. And so they've just kind of compensated, right?
Yeah.
So we had parents coming in our doors, and they're seeing us use a structured literacy program to address their dyslexic children, and they were self-identifying. They were saying, I had the same problem.
Wow.
I was never taught to read.
Wow.
I'm so happy that my child now
Sure.
has this option and
Yes.
has this available to them. I didn't know that there was a name for this. I
Right.
didn't know it was dyslexia.
Right.
Nobody ever told me about that. But what parents can do is to just ask questions and don't just take what teachers are saying, because teachers don't know everything.
That's
Now we
right.
respect teachers,
yes.
we respect the profession,
Yes.
but a child's best advocate is their parent.
It's their parent.
Nobody knows their child better than you do.
That's right.
And so when you feel, if your discernment, if you sense that something is
Yeah,
not right,
right.
Yeah.
or you notice that your child is struggling in something, ask those questions and keep asking those questions and look, search, do your own research until you feel within your spirit and your child is showing you
Yes.
through how they live and how they are attempting to go to school, that they're not dreading it,
Yeah.
that they're not always saying, my head hurts, or their behavior is not escalating. There's usually an effect behind
Yeah.
that.
You know,
Or they're
I
hiding
know
their
that is
homework
so
or
true.
whatever.
Exactly.
That is so true. This young lady, well, younger girl, this grandmother is raising her, and I mean, and she throws a fit at school,
Yeah.
and that's probably the reason.
Yeah, because kids know. They
So
they
can go
internalize
home
that.
and,
Yeah.
you know,
I'm going to do whatever I can do.
get out of here.
That's an avoidance tactic of
Yes.
kids who struggle with literacy, and all children. If I am not competent in my mind, if I know I'm not understanding, I don't want to be in this uncomfortable place or
Right.
this uncomfortable position. I don't want my teacher to call on me,
Yes.
and then everybody in the class figures out that
yeah.
I don't know how to read. So I'm going to act up. I'm going to be disrespectful,
Sure.
and I'm going to do whatever I got
Or
to do.
you're going to drop
get
out of school,
class.
and many of them do drop out of school.
Wow.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
That
failures
school to
before they
prison
try.
pipeline is real.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
real.
that is so
It's real.
Okay, so
I know we've been diving in.
But that
Oh,
opened my eyes up
goodness.
to this young child, and I'm going to mention that to,
Yeah.
to the,
Oh, yeah.
Ask the question. How is this child's reading?
Yes, because really I told him they needed to spank her.
But you know
But
what?
that's not the key.
That's
No, it's not.
the answer.
That's not it.
No, you
we
have
need
to
to
dig
know
in deeper.
what it is. I don't know a child who wants to go to school and fail.
No.
I don't know one.
No.
So if they're exhibiting characteristics of behavior, that's usually the effect. It's not the cause.
Okay.
And so a lot of times what happens, even when it was with my daughter, we knew second grade that she was really, really struggling. And as each grade went on, her behaviors began to escalate. And then all the focus was on how do we curb her behavior? And there was no focus on how do we raise her literacy scores? How do we raise her reading scores? And what you will find is if you address the reading issue, the behaviors dissipate or go away.
Sure.
In most cases.
Because they start having successes and
Oh,
feeling better
they
about
feel-
themselves.
exactly.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right.
Exactly.
Feeling good
And the
about
social and
themselves.
emotional trauma
Yeah.
that not being able to read has on students is profound. We have a lot of kids. One little girl in particular came through our doors, and I thought she was introverted. I mean, she was so quiet.
Really?
She was so withdrawn into herself. And her mom was just like, that's just how she is. And as we screened her and we told her this is dyslexia, you have the characteristics, and we started to teach her, she would come to tutoring, and she walked in and she had got her hair done and had her little lip gloss on,
Look at
and
it.
she came in, and it was, we could rarely see her face. She always was this way
Yeah.
when she would come. But she had her head held high. She was
Wow.
flipping her hair, and the little black girl, lovely hair. And I looked at her and I said, "Well, who is this?" And she said her name. I won't say her name on
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
You know, but she said her name, and I said, "What is?" And she said, "I'm not stupid."
Oh,
She literally said
is
that.
Almost makes me
I
emotional.
realized that I am not dumb. It was, and I said, "No, you are not." I said, "You just learn differently,
Wow.
and we've got to teach you the way you learn." And once we do that, you saw who you were, and so it just changed. So it has such a huge role on children. We had a young man, and I happened to be there that day, and I knew it was God that I was there to hear him. And he was sitting in there with his tutor, and they were teaching him, and he just jumped up and said, "You mean I'm not stupid?"
Wow.
A little black boy. He said, "All this time," I mean, very animated, like he said,
Yeah.
"All this time, I have been thinking that I am just dumb, that I just didn't know what I was doing."
Yeah.
And I understand.
Wow.
He just had that outburst.
Wow.
Wow.
It was that impactful for him.
Wow.
I will never forget it.
Wow.
And I said, we have got to continue doing this because how many children feel that way?
So is this a class or something that you guys put on? And I sure would like some more information, because I want to give this information to this parent.
Yeah, so what it is that we do one-on-one direct instruction. So we do that in person, or also we're considered a hybrid.
Okay.
So we also do online for kids that, you know, can't make it to the
Okay.
center, or it's better for them to do it from home. So they log in virtually and they do that. But what we do is we screen the child, we get recommendations, or a parent might call us, and so we screen the child to see if they have the characteristics of dyslexia. If they do, and then we set them up on a tutorial program, so 3 times a week for 1 hour, and they come and they see us, and then we use a scope and sequence type program, which means it builds upon each skill that we know through the science of reading. You'll hear me say that a lot. The
Yeah.
science of reading, which is what we know is the evidence that shows that when we teach these skills to you, you will learn to read and your reading level will elevate.
Wow.
The science of reading. The things that are being used right now in our largest school district and many other school districts is not the science of reading. We're trying to get them there, but they're
Okay.
not. They're using whole language, which is just looking at the whole world without understanding how to break it apart, how to decode, how to blend, understanding the individual sounds and any of those things. That's what they're using now, which is why we have the deficit for literacy for all students.
So we're saying basically our educators are not receiving the appropriate education.
And they are not. And
To
our
meet those
educators,
needs.
our educators are in schools of colleges of education rather
Yeah,
that are
exactly.
not teaching them the science of reading. And so they themselves don't have the information in order to be able to
Okay.
teach kids.
Okay.
So when parents are thinking, well, these teachers went to
Yeah,
school,
yeah.
unfortunately, the
Exactly.
schools
Yeah.
didn't teach these teachers
Right.
appropriately.
Right.
So you see how it's the parents are trusting the teachers, but the teachers don't have the information or the knowledge. They're starting to
Good.
move that
I was
way.
going to say, are they starting to revamp?
They're starting
their
to,
education?
but as I said, starting. So if you have a child in school right now, they may not be, more than likely they are not getting taught the way that we know works to teach children to read. So if they are struggling, we need to do something different and
Okay.
advocate for them.
Now, did you have something else? So
I was going to sum up because we're going to be going into
Well,
our...
I want her to look right
I
in
don't know
there
if we
and tell
have
them
enough time.
how to, you know, when parents discover that.
Oh, yeah,
How
yeah.
to get,
Get a hold of her?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can share that with our audience, your information. I'm sure they'll put it on the screen as well.
Yes.
Your
yes. You want me to share it now?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So you can reach out to me at voice, as in your speaking voice, advocacycenter.org. You can look us up on facebook.com/Voice Advocacy Center. You can call us at 402-431-2574. And you can also look us up at blackliteracymatters.org or facebook.com/Black Literacy Matters. You can get to us all of those ways, and
Praise
we would be
God.
more than happy to help you
Praise
and your
God.
family and anything else that you need, even beyond literacy. If you have an educational issue and you need an advocate to help you voice to the school your concerns, we're there to help you.
oh, praise God.
So that's going to end our segment today. We're going to bring her back next week for a part 2. We want to talk a little bit more about the treatment and your center and what you're doing, and also about the wonderful conference you just had.
Awesome.
But
I'd
thank you
love to be back,
you
and I'm
for
happy to be
again
back.
for
how interesting.
joining us.
Yeah.
Yes.
Light bulb went on for me.
So we hope and pray that our audience received much information. Thank you for joining us today.